Hi there, my name is Teni Brant, and welcome to Speak Dicely, the podcast where I get together with other tabletop enthusiasts and we speak dicely together. One of the great challenges that game masters will come to face is how to maintain the attention of your players. And with the current social distancing situation, there are many distractions for players as they sit in their own homes. Figuring out how to keep the players' engagement in the game and story is a skill that will have some variation from group to group. But there are some general ideas that might be a good place to start for any player group. Joining me today to talk about player engagement are Will Bartley and returning guest Anthony Saul. Hey there, folks.
Hey, dude.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How's everybody?
Good.
I'm giving big thumbs up on my end.
Ah, nice. Love that. Immediate podcast visual.
Yes, the thumbs up energy I could hear. Just
Gotta bring it to life.
Yeah.
So welcome, Will, to the podcast. It's exciting. I'm always trying to bring new people onto this podcast. And even though we've got returning guest Anthony with us here too, I'm excited to hear, because you know what this means? We get to hear some first-time D&D stories.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, give us a lowdown about you, Will. What are you passionate about?
Well, outside of tabletop role-playing games, I mean, I've been playing D&D for a number of years now, but every summer I coach sailing as well. I head off to Kingston, one of the best areas in the world to sail, for 8 weeks, and so that's what I do during the summers, and then during the year I also work on a lot of theater projects. Really big into the arts. For anybody who knows me, I've been training in classical performance for the last few years, and I studied at York University in directing and acting, so yeah, just general enthusiast of the arts and culture and athleticism, healthy living, all good things.
And can you give us some background as to your tabletop role playing history?
Yeah, sure. It actually started back in my first year of university, which let's see, that's like 8 years ago now. I feel old. So yeah, 8 years ago, actually. Funny enough, my first experience with playing Dungeons and Dragons, I would say that was my first experience anyway, was introduced by you, Teni. You sat down with me and helped me make a Fire Ganassi in 4th edition, who was a sword mage, and I got to throw swords all over the place and teleport to them during combat. It was a great time, and within the first 20 minutes of my very first session, I was pantsed by a fellow player, Raph. In-game, as a character, not at the table. That happened later. But yeah, that was my first experience, and from the moment I got pantsed, I knew D&D was for me.
I'd forgot about the pantsing.
Yeah, he was a gnome, so he got under me pretty quickly, and I was trying to get hired by them so they would have to pay me, and he was like, nah, I'm not having any of that. So, yeah, he pantsed me, and I joined their party.
Your payment is a job well done.
And a pantsing.
But yeah, since then, I guess just quickly too, is I got engaged with a lot of my friends' other campaigns, and I got to play a sea shanty pirate at one point for another recording we were doing, which was fantastic. And then recently, actually, like a couple years ago, started playing another pirate. Weird, I didn't even realize till this moment that I've played in 2 pirate adventure campaigns. Both were fantastic. And I also picked up DMing a few years back, and I've gotten a pretty consistent group of players together, and I really just love the epic tales that you can yarn together with the players at the table. I don't think there's any better experience than communal storytelling when I look at the arts, and finding that while playing a game that has some really clear rules and boundaries to it can be an incredibly powerful and fun experience. So yeah, that's my history.
In the end, that's really what it comes down to is storytelling. I'm sure all of us and everybody who's been on the podcast so far, like we all just have a love for storytelling, and that's what makes this game so great.
Stories are powerful.
I mean, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to add on something I've already said, which is like, and telling stories with other people is even more powerful. Like, you know, if you're telling a story with 5 other people, it can only become better. You know, any story that you have to tell individually, like, I'm sure has power to it. I mean, you're a DM for a reason. You have a story in mind that you kind of want to share with people, but it's the player's engagement, which that actually wasn't an intentional segue, but it's the player's engagement that really makes the story have flavor, right?
Well, you were brought on to today's episode for a purpose. That's right. All right, Mr. Segue. Well, if you want to talk about player engagement so much, let's get to it.
Do it.
Well, I'll also give a little bit of background on mine and Will's relationship as well. Like we like he said, I showed him how to play D&D in first year university, and I remember before we actually did the session with which I think it was 8 people wanted to play.
Oh yeah,
it was
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Rachel and I showed up in costume, if you remember that.
Wow,
Oh
that's
my goodness.
awesome. For your first time playing, you showed up in costume?
Yeah, absolutely. I even had a sword I brought with me.
Wow. This man is dedicated.
Oh, so good. Yeah, so I think there was about 8 of you, and 4th edition was really hard to DM. But before we got to that session, I think you and I had it was kind of like a pitch to you about like D&D. I was like, all right, this is what it is. And you and I had a one-on-one session with this character I'd made for you. I just built you a tiny dungeon. We went through it real quick in the common room in the the
In Winter's College,
dorms, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
college. And I still remember running through that with you, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I actually forgot about that until you mentioned it. That was the coolest moment for me. Like 4th edition was interesting to me because like I started in 4th, which is I think a lot of players that I've been playing with, they started in 4th or 3.5, and they played with 4th for a long time before 5th was introduced, and it was a really weird experience going from 4th edition where everything's written out on a card, because what I saw a lot of the time is people picking up their card and being like, well, I do this right here on the card.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it was fun to like take what was on the card and be like, wait, can I do this though? Like with that in mind? And they kind of not break the rules, but certainly push the envelope on what was allowed based on the description.
Yeah. 4th edition really put things into a fine envelope of like, this is what this does. But 5th edition broke those constraints a lot more and allowed a lot more creative interpretation.
Yeah, I never played 4th edition, so hearing the stories from it are very interesting to me about how rigid it was and like how crunchy it was.
Well, and it's weird because like when on the surface level, you wouldn't think that. Like you open up 4th edition, you look at the races, the classes, the subclasses, like the backgrounds. It's like, I remember sitting down with you, Denny. It must have taken me 3 hours even to decide a race. Like it's so much information and choice.
It had a lot of options for sure, but yeah, it's I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse to not have played that edition. I mean, it's always good to try other game systems to have like that perspective, but I don't know about 4th edition. Like it's I'm glad we're not there anymore, but it might have been necessary to get to where we are now, which I think 5th edition is superb.
Me too. If I were to delineate the two, like I'm probably going to get some hate for this, and I apologize if you get any negative comments on this comment, but I would define 4th edition as like a really pretty package with a rock inside. And like and like 5th edition is like finding a rusted chest in the ground that's like covered in dirt and mold, but on the inside is this like beautiful artwork from 500 years ago. You know, it's like it's just something really nice underneath a layer of like doesn't seem like as much fun. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy we are where we are. So we're here to talk today about players' engagement. Before we get to actually talking about how to manage player engagement, what does player disengagement look like, and why does it happen?
I could start with this.
Sure.
So, especially these days, as you mentioned in the intro, where we're all playing together over Zoom and Roll20 and all these other like virtual tabletops, sometimes over Discord as well, it's very easy to just look away from what's going on in front of you. You don't have that kind of draw of a table of your friends sitting around you. And I guess the real life pressure of being distracted. I find when you're sitting at a table and playing Dungeons and Dragons or any tabletop role-playing game, it's much easier to stay focused because you have that kind of physical presence of everyone else. But like if we were playing a game right now, it'd be very easy for me to like look at my cat or something and be distracted, or see like a notification on my phone.
Yeah, I mean, I literally, as you said that, got a notification on Discord and I was like, damn it.
Yeah. So there's a lot that, especially these days, that can distract us from what's going on and being present. As far as what it looks like, it's, people looking at their phones, or it could be they weren't paying attention, so they're taking longer turns in combat, or they have to ask clarifying questions of where they are in the world of the game.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think you captured it pretty well, what it all looks like. The number one thing I see when I used to play at tables before the pandemic happened was, like you said, people on phones. That's the number one thing that I see when it comes to player disengagement. But there's that. I've also seen people that use laptops, and the tricky part now with D&D Beyond becoming so popular is that everyone's using their phone or their laptop or their tablet to have their character sheet up. But I see a lot of scrolling. That's when I know disengagement's happening. When I see this going on, by this I mean like fingers going up and down on a page. It's like, yes, you do need to scroll a little bit with D&D Beyond, but not that much.
Yeah.
Other player disengagement, like I've seen conversations happening at tables, like quiet, hushed conversations between players because they know they shouldn't, like maybe shouldn't be talking right now, but there's this whole other action going on, right? Which sometimes that is also player engagement, though. Of course, they could be talking about character stuff, but it's something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, it really depends on the topic.
The other one I see on Zoom a lot now that I've been playing more is muted cameras, turned off mics.
Oh, interesting.
Because there's symbols that show for that stuff, and it's not, obviously everyone has moments of privacy. Like when we're doing online content, it's impossible not to. We're all at home. We have families. We have lives. Things are going to be moving in the background, et cetera, et cetera. But like if somebody's mic has been off for like 30 minutes, I might be like, hey, like how's it going there? Or if the camera's been off for a while and there's a lot of role playing going on and I haven't heard them speak for a little while, for me, that's kind of a teller too that the player might be disengaged.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I feel like I haven't played in any games during the pandemic where anyone has had their camera off. But I mean, I get it. Some people probably liked having that kind of comfort for the option to do that.
Yeah, it's great for those who have a bit of social anxiety and have like a lot of was it video fatigue? Is that what they're called? Zoom fatigue?
Oh, yeah.
There's like a term they're using these days for that.
Both I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah, having the option to turn your camera off is always nice. One of the players I have in one of my games, his MacBook camera just doesn't work. So whenever we play our game, his camera is always off. So it's impossible for me to tell what he's doing unless he's like talking and in the action. Luckily, he pays attention pretty well, and I don't really have to worry about him. But if it were a different player, I might have a problem.
Yeah. It's I think it's easier when you're together in person, but I mean, kind of being able to gauge like people if they've got like a tired look or that kind of glazed look in their eye. It's like, okay, I think they're also just kind of, this might have been a long session for these players. And when player disengagement kind of just begins to set in, that might be a sign that it's a good time to end the session or find that nice story moment to do so.
Or take a break.
And that's the thing too, is
30-minute break goes a long way.
Like, go grab something to eat, go get some water, use the washroom, whatever you guys want to do. And I don't know if groups do that enough. I mean, at least the groups I play in, we're usually like pretty like, all right, let's go. We'll go 4 hours in a row. And I'm like, I love this game, but I'd like a moment to just breathe.
I agree with that. I think that's pushing into how to engage, though. So let's keep talking about disengagement before we get into solutions, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I had written down here was players not paying attention to each other. So this could happen in combat or in just general role play, where a player says, I'm going to do this, and another player who hasn't been paying attention does something that just doesn't make sense with what the previous player did, or completely goes against the plan that they were trying to make. And the player who initially started that is now looking at the other player being like, why did you do this? Why did you screw that up for me or whatever?
If I can add on to that, the like in tandem to that too, one thing I see a lot at the table with disengaged players is like, oh, what are they doing? Oh, okay, cool. Like I chime in, I speak up, and it's like, well, you weren't with them. Like 10 minutes ago, they said that they were going to the shops, and you decided to stay back at the end. It's like, oh, right, never mind then. And they sit back in their chair, right? Like I see that one all the time when it comes to being a player and when I'm DMing too. It's just players that are not aware of where other players are at. So like again, too, not paying attention to what other players are doing.
Yeah, and that one's kind of tough to manage too, because like sometimes it's based on an individual's like personality. Like somebody might have that less of an attention span, but if you've got a player that's normally pretty good and one day they're just like, wait, when did you do that? And it's like, oh, I should have been paying attention. and sometimes those opportunities will get missed. And, not every story moment's going to be about your characters. So give the attention to the other characters as well. And your character will be fully in the loop when it is their chance to make a choice that actually matters.
The last thing that I really identify as disengagement at a table, and I think it's one that goes a little bit underseen, I guess would be maybe the right way to phrase that, is actually limelighting players. It's like an archetype we hear of players all the time. And the reason I see limelighting as a disengagement issue is that the player is seeking out excitement constantly. And you can say that that's a really negative thing to have at your table, but I've played with some limelighting players before, and I've found, and we're going to get into this when we talk about engaging players, but like giving them ample opportunities to engage reduces the amount of limelighting that they try to seek out. But I find when you have players that are limelighting, they're looking for something to pay attention to, but they're not sometimes being provided that opportunity. And so I do see that as a form of disengagement as well with a player is limelighting. Because they want to be there. They want to be excited about what's going on. They're trying to find opportunities to be so. Sometimes inserting themselves into the center of it is their way of...
Yeah, for sure.
I do apologize. Can you define a limelighting?
Someone who tries to jump into the action whenever possible. Like they're kind of like scene hogs.
Interesting. I've never heard it called that before. I like it. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, because I mean, sometimes the players are so desperate to be engaged that it kind of becomes the opposite side of the issue.
Where instead of sitting back and just glazing over, they're like, well, I want to do something to get something going. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Will.
Yeah, it's a personal philosophy of mine as a DM, and like when I started DMing, I really tried to embrace that at every corner that I took, is that like it's very rare that you have bad players at the table or bad archetypes, quote unquote, as you'll see like YouTube channels talking about this all the time, is like the 5 worst type of players to have at your table.
Right.
And for each one of those, I'm like, well, like, you know, I really do think there's different tactics we can try as and of course, sometimes you're just going to get players that maybe aren't in it for the fun of the group. They're in it for the fun of themselves or not in it for the fun at all. But I would argue that 95% of players I have DM'd for or played with, they're there to have fun with their friends. Like, no one's coming to D&D being like, I'm going to hate this for the next 4 hours. Like, why are you here?
Yeah, I agree with that.
And even in the situation where it's like a player might fit into one of those labeled bad archetypes, there is a group out there that will work for them. It just might not be this one.
Yeah, very true. And I would argue, being the king of segues that I am, that like it's a matter of the DM finding a way to engage those players.
Well, and I mean, there is a little bit of responsibility on the player side of those kind of situations where they do kind of realize that they are one of those kind of players. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, kind of identify what's not working with the group and try your best to better yourselves, because we can always better ourselves. Like, at this point, I'm sure I could be labeled as a rules lawyer, and I'm sure I have in the past done some rules lawyery things because I'm so familiar with the rules, and you know, it's just stuff like that. You have a type of personality, you have certain things you enjoy, and you just kind of have to tune into yourself and go, all right, so what shouldn't I do because this is a social situation and I don't want to make anyone feel bad?
Yeah, it's about being more self-aware of the kind of player you are, I guess, and the kind of person.
Mm-hmm. And I guess when I say like the DM has a responsibility in that area too, is that I play with a lot of new players. I'm introducing people to the game all the time. Almost every campaign I run usually has 1 or 2 experienced players and then 3 or 4 new players. And the one thing that I see a lot is that, and I've seen it in some groups too, where the DM discounts new players, that maybe not knowing that they're not as experienced, by saying, oh, they're a limelighter, oh, they're a rules lawyer, oh, et cetera, right? And I think it's really easy to dismiss the communal responsibility too, because I've found that some of these player archetypes that are issues, the easiest way to resolve them is just to talk to them one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And I've found that usually resolves the issue, whatever the issue may be.
Whoa, crazy. Talking to someone about your problems with them might fix them?
I know, it's weird, right?
No, that doesn't work. I don't think that works.
Okay. I'll never try again.
Anthony, you just improv canceled him.
Ha! Get no butted, fool.
I feel like a fool, Anthony.
You know, you guys just met, but I'm loving the chemistry here already.
Yeah, for real. I almost feel bad.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, most things in Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing can be solved by just communication. This is a theme that has come up on the channel before, and this is another one of those instances. If you are a player that you don't feel like you do fit in well with the group, talk to the group and identify or let them hopefully in a nice way, kind of tell you what's bothering them, or you tell the group about them what's bothering you, and, negotiate, figure out how you can solve it. But sometimes that does mean this might not be the group for you, and that's okay.
Nice thing about D&D is that there's hundreds of thousands of people, millions, who like to play it. So,
and now with the world as it is, there are Discord servers out there that you can join to play games and meet people. I mean, people have been playing online games for so long, and you hear the stories of people having a friend in another country. So you just kind of got to put yourself out there if that's the case.
Yeah.
Those player archetypes, quote unquote, just as you were saying, Denny, is like, if you're a power gamer, if you're a rules lawyer, like if you're a limelighter, there are parties out there for you. I promise. I played with a group of power players before, and trust me, as a DM, it's a horrifying but very humbling experience.
It just gives you an excuse to throw harder monsters at them. I don't see the problem.
Some of the most
here.
fun I've had in D&D was playing with a bunch of min-maxers.
Yeah.
Because I could throw whatever I wanted at them, and somehow they always came out. It's like, awesome. Cool.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think if there's any other examples of disengagement I can think of beyond like player archetypes and like looking at your phone and just being generally distracted. Trying to see if there's anything else that's kind of like limelighting, where it could be like something that we think is the opposite of a disengaged player. Just trying to think outside the box here for a moment.
Somebody who begins to step into the DM's role, I think, would be the opposite side of that.
Oh, yeah.
They start narrating?
They start narrating. They start inserting things into the environments that you're like, I'm sorry to know but you, but that's not there because I'm the DM and this is my world.
Yeah.
Like you've got your character and that's your jurisdiction. I've got the world and the NPCs. That's my area.
I think that's also kind of in the realm of limelighting, though.
Yeah.
You're kind of stepping into or stepping over the shoes of someone else, or stepping on the shoes of someone else, rather.
I think we've covered most types of disengagement as you would see at a table or on like in the virtual world. I really can't think of any other ones that you would just commonly see anywhere. Like you could talk about doodling and things like that, but
some people need to doodle though to like stay focused. So
that's what I mean. Is like I don't want to tear apart one thing with the knowing the opposite is that it exists.
Exactly. Like I definitely have some players who their form of note taking is they just doodle, and that's the way that they can pay attention. But if they just don't do anything, they just zone out. So
I've got one more form of disengagement.
Okay.
Yeah. This is actually a bit of a story time. So,
oh, good.
This is a while ago. I was running one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most epic stories I have ever written and played with people. And honestly, like the contributions of the different characters with the storylines were amazing. And I had this one player where once in a blue moon, like they'd be playing Warhammer on their computer, like a video game, while at the table. And like to the point where other players had come to me and been like, hey, like, are you going to talk to this player about the fact that they're playing this video game at the table while we're all playing D&D? Because it was that constant level of disengagement that we've been talking about where it's like, oh, well, I want to chime in. Oh, well, I want to do that thing. It's like, well, you're not there. You didn't say that you wanted to go. You didn't, it's like, I want to buy this potion even. It's like, well, you didn't, how much money do you have? It's like, well, it says here I have 500 gold. Like, didn't you spend like 490 gold at the last town type of thing? And just evident, not note-taking, I would say, is like another form of disengagement. Yeah. That's one you see a lot, too. I'm glad we're talking about this one player now, because I'm reminded of a few disengagement notes. It's okay. At the same time, wonderful role player, really fun characters, really zany characters, completely out there. Added a lot of spice to the table, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. But yeah, that's a huge one for me, and I've never seen it since then, but I'm sure other DMs have experienced this, like players playing another game while playing D&D. Like, that is ultimate disengagement.
Yeah.
That is unfortunate.
That's very unfortunate.
I've never experienced that personally, but yeah, I could imagine that.
I think I've experienced that, but I don't know what my players are doing on the other side of their Zoom screens. So
yeah, listen here, Wally guy with no camera. We know what you're up to.
I think, yeah, players not taking notes is a big one, and players not marking things down on their sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they use like a spell slot or something, or
that's
like a finite resource like that. And then you having to remind them later when they try to cast a spell with that same slot, like, hey, you already used this today. Make sure that you mark that on your sheet next time, because I don't want to have to do it for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the DM has so much to do already. We can't be managing all the players' characters as well.
Yeah.
Uh,
Along with like special abilities and item uses. That's way too much to ask one person to keep track of. So please keep track of your stuff in your games.
And I think another one that I did think of is a player who allows another player to control the action, even though it's might be a scene that like the DM thought might highlight them a bit more. And they're just like, nah, he seems to have it. Let so and so take the lead.
Yeah, I can see that happening at a few of my tables, actually. It happens. Like sometimes the player is just not feeling as into it as they were in a previous session, and they just need someone else to take the reins, and that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we can all identify problems at our tables, and it might be off days. I know even as a DM, I myself have experienced off days, and that might result in a lackluster session, or at least I might perceive it that way.
That's a tough one too, actually, and I think we a lot of this question has been towards the mentality of players, but I think it's good for players to understand what a disengaged DM might look like too, because that's huge. Because sometimes the players need to be the one to call a break, right? They may see something, right, that the DM isn't. Because like I think there's a mentality as DMs a lot of the times, like I just got to push through. It's like it's for the other people at the table, like it's got to be fun for them, right? But in the meantime, sometimes we as DMs, you know that meme with like the big soldier like taking 100 arrows to the back and there's like this little kid in front of him. It's like I think sometimes DMs can have that mentality of like no matter how I feel, as long as they're having a good time and they're safe, right? And it's like sometimes the DM can be a bit disengaged too. So let me ask you guys if it's cool, like what does a disengaged DM look like? Because it happens.
That's a good question. What does a disengaged DM look like? I'm thinking a disengaged DM is one who is not really vibing with how the players took the encounter that they threw at them and isn't really into whatever solution the players came up. So they're just trying to push it along as fast as they can. Or a disengaged DM is one who, and I am guilty of this, planned a starting point and an ending point for a small traversal encounter exploration and didn't think of anything to put in between. So you have a DM saying, and you push on through this area that looks a lot like the last area, and it looks like the last area. And then at that point, I'm not really sure what you would do in that case.
I think the other side could be true, though, too, is like a DM who just constantly uses random encounters just to kind of fill a session.
Yeah.
Like, they're so uninvested in the story now that they're just like, my players just want to hit things. So, okay, 2 elephants show up in the middle of this jungle. You go ahead, beat them up. I don't care.
Yeah, it's a challenge too, because a lot of these things also sound like underpreparedness, which can be another huge form of disengagement I see from DMs, right? Is like when they come to the session and it's like, some DMs, and I'm one of these DMs, so I'm not criticizing this type at all, but like I'm the type of DM who can show up with 1 page of writing and run like a 6-hour session, and it's totally fine. Because I really vibe and jazz with a lot of the players' choices throughout a session. Like I try to improv off a lot of what they do. I know other DMs that show up with 20 pages of planning, like Michael Pichtelli is like that, right? And he's a great DM. But one thing I do see sometimes is DMs who are, it's hard to tell which one they are, but they don't show up with a lot of planning haven't been done. So that tells me that there's a level of disengagement either with what the players are up to or where the story is headed. Because one huge problem, and I think this is what railroading sometimes comes in as, which is that the DM is disengaged because they're not vibing with the direction the players are going in their world, and so they try to reel it back in the direction they want the story to go. And some campaigns are meant to be railroaded. Like I don't think it's a valid criticism to be like railroading is always bad. If you have a specific story you want to tell, okay, but maybe be open with the players about that. But overall, like I find railroading can sometimes be a form of disengagement because it's like, try to find some enjoyment in what the characters and the players' choices are too, right? And see where that leads you.
I think there is something to say about that. It sounds like in a situation like that, it might be a like more of a selfish thing where it's like they just want to do what they want to do. It's like maybe Dungeons and Dragons isn't the game for you. Maybe you're not looking for a collaborative storytelling thing. Maybe you just go play a video game that has a good story. And I mean, that's totally fine. Role playing might not be for you because in the end, tabletop role playing games are meant to be a community experience. And I think finding the way to engage is to be excited for the other players, to be excited about the DM's plot that they might have planted seeds here and there. And if you're a DM and the players aren't really biting into your plot, it might be time to either reimagine the plot to be something that you'll be excited about and they'll be excited about, or go a few more sessions, have some combat so they can try these characters out a little longer, and then wave it off and say, all right, I think this campaign's going to fizzle out.
Yeah, and it happens. And just like we talked about earlier, how a DM can always talk to a player to resolve an issue, players out there, like, feel free to talk to your DM. I had a player come up to me one time. It was the third session into a new campaign, and I had done maybe 15 to 20 hours of writing for this, and I was feeling pretty good about it when I first started. And then the third session, at the end of it, I had a player come up to me and be like, you don't seem to be enjoying this. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm kind of not. And like, and the player was like, I'm really enjoying the game, just to be clear. But like, if you're not enjoying it, let's try something different. Like, let's play a different world. Let's play a different setting. Let's play different characters. Like, just if you're not vibing with it as the DM, it's okay to let it fizzle. Like, you don't have to finish every single campaign you start.
Mm-hmm. And a lot won't get done.
Yeah, that's true.
Interesting. I did not consider like talking about how a disengaged DM might appear to everybody at the table. Really, I like that. I'm glad we went on that.
That's why we pay him the big bucks, right?
The last one I'll mention is DMs who are on their like 6th cup of coffee or 4th Red Bull. That is a DM who has not gotten enough sleep, and no matter how excited he is about the story and the characters, that's a disengaged DM. And I've been that DM. That's the one I'm guilty of.
That's fair.
Oh dear.
I stayed up all night getting ready for the session.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Gotta keep pumping myself so I can survive.
I need my blood to Red Bull ratio to be about 60-40 in favor of the Red Bull.
Yeah.
If your D&D game is starting to feel like work, that's the time to put it down. It shouldn't be work. It's all for fun. Sure, there can be a lot of work that goes into it, but if you're not enjoying it, nope, it's time to put it down.
Do something else for a bit. Come back to it later with a fresh mind.
Heck, you could even just say, like, guys, we're going to go on hiatus for a little while, and when I'm refreshed, we can come back to this story. Or if somebody else wants to DM for a couple of sessions, that might help too.
Yeah, run a couple one-shots, see how they like it.
Honestly, the best long-term campaigns I've played, every single one of them has had a 3 to 6 month break somewhere along the way. And that's fine. Like, I think the thing is that to check in with your players to make sure they're still excited about the idea of coming back to it if you're the DM, but like, it's okay to, absolutely, take a break. I would say the top 3 campaigns I've played have all had a fairly long break at some point because the DM got a bit of burnout. And it happens. Mm-hmm. It's impossible to avoid, I would say.
Another thing, a player might not be enjoying the character they're playing. And I think it's all right to tell the players, if they're not enjoying their characters, retire them, figure out a plan to get them out of the story so they can try something that they might instead enjoy. So you kind of have DMs, put your story down if you don't like it. Players, put your character down if you don't like it.
Maybe not in such a violent manner, but put them down.
Yeah.
Take them out to a green pasture, hold a gun to their head and say, well, it's been fun, Jimmy. What do you mean?
And then Jimmy went to the farm.
And then is their new character the gunslinger?
Yeah, exactly.
One of my favorite moments, there's 2 good moments I've seen of that. One was the one, Denny, where you were DMing us back in first year university, where Raph touched a gem in like a deep ruin and his character like dematerialized. And then what rematerialized in this gnome's place was a dwarf with like completely opposite virtues and values as this previous character, but it was Raph's new character.
Well, you never touch weird gems. Just don't touch them.
Never do it.
Or do.
My favorite one where I had a player be like, I'm not vibing with this character anymore. I was like, okay, cool. Like, we'll figure it out. I had a purple worm pop up in a desert that they were traversing through, and they'd been in this desert for like a week and a half. And purple worm popped up, and like, it was pretty clear because they were like level 4 players, and they were like, okay, like this is not something we should be messing with. I just presented opportunities for this player to die. And so they attacked the purple worm, and the purple worm ate them. So all the other players were like, oh shit, like they started hitting the purple worm. Well, they did enough damage because you know how a lot of the time with the swallow and like holding on to characters, they'll spit something up, right? Or whatever they've eaten. Well, it didn't spit up the player character, it spit up their new character instead.
Oh, that's great.
He was like, I've been trapped in there for 15 years. He's like feeding off the body of the purple worm. It was like, this is amazing. This is like, it doesn't have to be this immaculate story. Like,
That's fantastic. That's such a good idea.
it was great. We had a great time with
I
it.
will steal that, I'm sure, at some point.
Oh, please do.
That is brilliant. I love that.
That's really good.
Oh dear. Should we move into talking about how we can kind of manage?
Yeah, let's move on.
Let's do it.
Yeah, Will was too good with that purple worm idea. We got to one up him.
Yeah.
Please do. I love being one up. I learned something every time.
That's a great philosophy to have. Absolutely. So, what can we do to engage our players?
Well, I think that last point that we made about a player not wanting to play a character anymore, and then you both gave a good solution for it. So that's one way you can do it if a player is disengaged in that particular fashion. Talk to them about switching up a character, maybe switching up their class or subclass. The latest rules book for 5th edition Tasha's Cauldron of Everything has options to retrain your subclass. So there are ways to get back into the game with a fresh perspective without having to, switch characters if you enjoy where the character came from and you don't like where they're going.
Yeah. And DMs out there, you really have to be open to, because one thing I hear at tables a lot, or I've heard it a number of times, enough times to see that it's a consistency, is DMs going like, no, you cannot change your character's class. No, you cannot change this. You cannot do that. It's like, within reason, obviously. If you have somebody who's been playing a barbarian for 12 levels and they're suddenly like, well, I want to be a wizard. It's like, you have an 8 intelligence, buddy. Like,
yeah, but I found this nice hat. Look at it. It looks pretty on me. I'm a wizard now.
Yeah, I'm a wizard.
I'm a wizard, Barry.
I was just about to say, you're a wizard, Grog.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, it's like, work with your players to figure out what an appropriate change would be. Because I have this, so this character just died at the last session. Total tragedy. I've been playing this character for almost 2 years now. His name was Vendasa Vendici. For any translation experts out there, that means his name was Vengeance. It was
Awesome.
great. And so anyways, he was an Oath of Vengeance paladin when he started out the game. His wife and his daughter were killed when he was acting as a King's Guard, and there's a whole conspiracy around it. Anyway, as the campaign went on, he actually abandoned his oath, and he became a fighter and a barbarian Path of the Zealot, which seemed very appropriate. He betrayed the gods, and the spirits of his fallen loved ones rose around him in vengeance. It was fantastic, right? And then recently, his character started to go through a bit of an arc where he started to rediscover his compassion and his sympathy for the people around him, and he started to reconnect with his past a little bit more and find that love that he used to have for the people and for his country, right? And so he started to develop and start to take levels in Oath of Redemption Paladin. So it was kind of this nice full circle story, and then by the end, he actually sacrificed himself to save all the other players, and it was just this really beautiful story, but it was only able to happen because the DM allowed for my character to change over time with the classes and with the archetypes. Now, of course, there's the Oathbreaker rules within 5e, which says, if you break your oath as a paladin, you become that in fighter levels. Now, sometimes that doesn't feel appropriate, because, I was an Oath of Vengeance paladin, now let me become an arcane archer. It's no, that doesn't make sense as much. But if there's valid reason for these characters to go through these changes, I think we as DMs do have a bit of responsibility to help characters make that transition and help players find that enjoyment in the game again.
For sure, yeah.
And I think a lot of the issues of player disengagement, the root of it can be mitigated during the session 0. Setting the standards of the table,
100%, yes.
How long do you guys want sessions to be? We will have a break at some point. Making sure that you've got these rules put in place to make everyone as comfortable and understanding of the typical outline, I suppose, of your D&D session.
Yeah, it's like the syllabus before the course that you're taking, but this course is fun and is with your friends, and you're not graded for it, and it's
participation only.
Participation only.
And you will have fun, damn it.
It's double fun. There's 2 kinds of fun. There's fun and there's fun.
You're going to have fun.
It's weird that I know exactly what you mean like that.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to mention about how to engage is session 0. Big, very important. Set those expectations so that everyone at the table knows what they're getting into every time you sit down to play.
What do you guys typically do at your session 0? Because I know this is a popular concept now, but for a long time, the concept of session 0 was a little bit airy-fairy and abstract and what it meant. And I think every DM has a little bit of a different sense as to what Session 0 looks like. Because I do it with all my campaigns now, too. But what do you guys do for your Session 0?
The two campaigns that I currently run are both like very long running. And I think for like my first Session 0, for the first game I ran, I didn't do one. And honestly, it was okay because the people I was playing with are my partner and two of my best friends. So we have pretty open lines of communication. We don't really need to worry too much about that. And we always talk and check up with each other when we can. The second game that I run, Session 0, was character creation. And these were all new players. So it was kind of hard to do character creation as well as setting expectations. So I'm currently planning to do like a session 55.5 with these guys to re-establish expectations, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something I do, because I have played a lot of games with a lot of new players, but thankfully I've also run games for experienced players. And typically in those sessions, if I don't have an idea for a story already in mind or a setting, I'll go, what do you guys want? Like, do you want intrigue? Do you want swashbuckling? Is there something we've all seen recently that we were just like, oh, that's a cool like world that they played in. Let's try that. Otherwise, if I do have an idea in my mind, I'll tell the players, I'm like, well, I think I want to explore a Western genre style of story because I've never actually played a game in a desert before. So there'll be a lot of this type of world. And kind of setting that standard gives the players the idea of what kind of characters they should be making for that kind of setting. But also it's their chance to be like, I'm not into that.
Yeah, I think that's huge, is having discussions with the players beforehand. That's a little bit harder because I can think of one DM in particular who, when he contacts the people he wants to play with, this guy already has plot A, B, C, all the way through Z figured out. And so, like, in terms of the setting of the story, it's not as present. But what he does, what I really like, is that like he does the character creation with all the players, one-on-one. So, like, he'd sit down with you, Denny, and then sit down with you, Anthony, and, like, build your character and give you suggestions and ideas about, you know, here's the world. How do you think your character might fit into that? So, like, he's a bit more, here's the story I want to tell. How can I work you into it? Which is great. Oh, I'm losing my train of thought so fast right now, and I apologize.
How many cups of coffee do you have?
Oh, this is only my second, but I got to drink like 4 more right now. But yeah, like I think it's huge to have conversations with your players before they start about what they want to be seeing. And this is the number one thing I do is when I start up my world, I give an extremely vague setting. And because I haven't even started writing the story yet, I have this concept. Like, the last concept I had was there were 5 colossal dragons that crafted the multiverse as we know it, using their elemental breaths. That was it. That was my base concept, right? And essentially all I had started was that, you know, I had the idea of countries among this one continent, and in the southern part of the continent, there was this mages college, right? And I told all the players, you know, you are students at this mages college. It doesn't matter how old you are. It's never too late to start studying again. Little philosophy message for everybody out there. Never too late to go back to school. But overall, I just asked them, you know, give me a reason why you might be at this college. Like, what is it you're trying to learn? What is it that about you that has brought you here? Is it an interest in the magical arts? Is an interest in being security detail for people doing research, right? And basically, from what they told me and the backgrounds that they gave me, right, I took their stories and essentially did like a bottom-up pyramid building. Like, here's the apex of the plot. This is what I want them to get to by the end of the campaign. But I said, you know, here I have these 6 players or these 5 players, right? How do I take what they've given me as their player characters, what they want to see happen in this world, and eventually intertwine it back to the main plot? Because a big issue that I see a lot of DMs do when it comes to their playing, I'm talking so much and I apologize for that.
Don't apologize.
Okay, cool. A big issue I see DMs doing a lot, and it's the number one issue I see at a lot of tables, is that DM goes, this is the story in the world that I want to tell and I want players to be a part of. And that's great. That's the perfect starting place. That's exactly what you want. And then they have these 5 players, 4 players, however many players at the table who say, these are our cool, unique, interesting characters who all have their own quirks, interests, like excelled abilities, etc., 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 right? The baseline of every good game. Good story, good world, good characters, right? But there's no integration that happens. Or the integration is low, meaning that, like, you know, the character from the northernmost country, which is an empire, decided to go to the Mages College because, you know, they wanted to escape their family and the bounds of their imperialistic lifestyle, and they disagree with a lot of what's going on there, and they want to go back with a higher level of education to teach the empire, right? To teach the higher nobles about what's right and wrong. If that doesn't come back in the story, Like, because eventually they're going to go there. It's a place in your world, right? If that doesn't come back in the story after they've toured and adventured around the world, learning more about different cultures, races, ethnicities, languages, etc., like the background, the history, the lore, if you don't put that player in a scenario where they get to actually go back to their homeland and actually start to make changes on that level, I think you're missing a huge storytelling opportunity. And it's a very simplistic example of what I'm talking about, but take your players' backgrounds and what they want to accomplish and find a way to intertwine that back to the main plot. And as I was saying with the Empire thing, maybe the Empire is actually dealing with a higher level of corruption that has to do with magic. And that magic is something that's related to the actual conflict of the plot. And it's something that I'm doing in my campaign right now. My players know about this, so I'm not spoiling anything. But like the westernmost country is actually, the ruler was essentially a puppet figure, and the guy behind the scenes is actually a vampire lord. And he's been turning in swaths and swaths of undead to fuel the war that's going on, right? But he's actually doing this because he's aware of a coming issue that's going to require a completely unified army. So there's like moral grays in there. But the daughter of that corrupted leader is one of the player characters.
Oh.
So it's, she has like direct tie to the main conflict of the story. If you can tie your characters' interests and their backgrounds and their goals to the main story's plot, your players are going to stay engaged every moment of it.
Yeah,
I promise.
For sure. 100%. Sometimes it's hard to make that happen given what you are given as a DM, because your players might not always give you a backstory at all, or the one that you're given is almost too specific that you can't find a way to fit it in. You can certainly try, but it might not always be as organic as you hope.
And if in those situations, again, just open that door of conversation, be like, so there are things in your backstory, if it's too specific, that I think we'll need to workshop in order to fit into this world better. Or if there's not enough, just start asking them questions to get their minds going. Like, okay, well, what's the place like where you're from? Is it a forest? Is it a lava field? And then they go, that sounds like a great idea. And it's like, well, great. Now I'll work with you to create your character. Hopefully you'll get inspired for next time.
Yeah, I mean, and I've had those, I should clarify, I've had those players too once my story starts, right, with the players at the table. And the thing that I do is every 3 or 4 sessions, I'll talk to each player one-on-one and ask them, like, what do you think of the story so far? What do you think your character's engagement might be? What are you looking to get out of this story? And that helps to fuel the story. Because sometimes, too, as the DM, like, you get ideas from what the players are looking for in terms of where you want the narrative to go. That happens all the time.
For sure.
As long as you're talking to your players.
Yeah, and the way I'm doing the Dicely campaign that I'm planning for this channel, we've had like 2 session zeros. Like we had one to just like basically talk about like, what does everybody feel like they want to do? Here are some homebrew rules that we'll be playing with just to make this game a little more spicy for some variations, because we've all played so often. And then the second one we did was, all right, so everybody's come together with a character idea in mind. And now I'm going to tie you all together. How do you know each other? How do you know a specific other character? And now I'm at a point where, now that I know a little bit more about these characters that they've got, I'm beginning to write their stories a little more. And I'm going to each player one-on-one to be like, all right, let's deep dive a bit more into your character. Where'd you come from? What's your goals? That kind of thing. So we really get what the character's about. The player understands their own motivation. And now I, as a DM, can better incorporate them into this plot idea that I've got. Because I think a plot's really great. Kind of like your idea there, where you've got this vampire lord and his daughter is one of the players. Like, how more directly can you incorporate a player into the story? Like, if you can find ways to shove, well, I don't want to say shove. I'm sure there's more nuance to it than that. But you can fit their stories in this kind of plot that you're weaving that you want to do.
And I think that kind of approach will probably nullify, I'd say, 60 to 70% of player disengagement. Like, you can get people involved immediately in every moment of your story, as Will said, if they are tied to it. As for, I guess, moment-to-moment disengagement, I think that comes down to tying a point in the story to the player, or like calling them out with like an NPC that they might know. That's more esoterical, though, I'd say, because it's more story based. What kind of moment-to-moment engagement tactics do you guys have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to use an example of what you just said, which is introducing an NPC. There was this really cool moment. Same player, same character as the daughter of the vampire lord. There, they were actually had to sail into the city because all of the borders were covered with bloodshed and war in every direction. So they had to sail in by the water, and the navy's there as a passport border, right? But the head of the navy's guard of these like string of ships was a childhood friend of that character. And she didn't know it. She just provided me with the name of this childhood friend that she had, right? And she's like, I haven't talked to them, and she's an elf. She's like, I haven't talked to them in 150 years. And I was like, oh, super cool. And then I blindsided her with this at the most convenient moment because she seemed a little bit disengaged for most of that session because it was sea travel. And I think every DM knows that sea travel and travel in general can sometimes be a bit of a drag for some players. Mm-hmm. But this was a moment where it was like, yeah, like, and you see, I can't even remember his name. Let's say it was like Emerson or something.
Sure.
I was like, you as the ship comes up to check your passports because they all acquired fake passports. Aledra, you see Emerson standing on the ship, commanding the guards to board your ship to check your passports. What do you do? Like, you put the player in an impossible position to not act. Like they have to do something.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really powerful tool you have as a DM is to incorporate the player back into the action. Don't just say like, hey, what do you do?
Yeah.
Put them in a scenario where it's, hey, you need to do something. What do you do? Right? Like, if you're just asking them what they do, it's like, oh, I'm just good with watching. Right? I've seen that a lot with introverted players. Nothing wrong with that, of course. But if you're really trying to encourage more play, you have to create scenarios in which these players have to.
One of the things, this isn't something I did, but I just want to talk about this. This is something that Logan Cracknell did when he was DMing for me. And I thought this was a great idea because when you really come down to it, a player wants their character to be cool or to be great. And identifying
I like being both those things.
it is a nice feeling. And if you can identify what makes a player's character really cool or really great or what they really want out of that character. For example, like I was this gunslinger hobgoblin and we were sailing away on a ship as this black dragon just emerged from this castle that we'd robbed and was pursuing us on the high seas. And we were escaping the city and there's like this water gate, I guess, with guards lined along the top. And we had to get through that gate before they shut it or the dragon was going to catch us. And I was like, can I like shoot the guards up top? And Logan's like, sure. I crit 20. He's like, all right, I'm not going to have you roll for this. Here's what happens. You get out your rifle and just snipe the 10 guys on the top of the wall. And I'm like, I really am the greatest gunman. And it felt so good that I got to do that. And just the DM kind of allowed this really cool moment.
Yeah, that's a big way to bring your players back in is giving them an opportunity to really flex the skills that their character has.
Mm-hmm.
Like throwing, like one of my characters plays a bard, and every now and then I like to throw a character at him that he can definitely use his bardic skills upon.
Mm-hmm.
And he's definitely the go-to guy whenever someone needs to be charmed or persuaded.
It was a demotivating thing for me to see one time. I remember this one DM who loved combat. Like you couldn't go 20 minutes without there being some sort of combat. Small, big, didn't matter. There was combat every 20 minutes. But we had a bard as part of the party. And this bard was like RP builds, spell-wise. Like literally, I think 2 spells for damaging and then like up to level 5 spells for casting. So just to put it in perspective, interesting move character design-wise to begin with. But overall, it was evident that this bard was meant for role-playing. But the DM wasn't providing opportunities for that to happen. And I think that too, like I agree with you, Anthony, is a bit of a misstep. It can very easily be fixed by identifying your player character's strengths and weaknesses. But also, provide moments for their weaknesses to show. Because some of the funniest moments I've seen in D&D have come from that.
Yeah, like if you have a character who... I think it's just funny sometimes to pick on your characters and their low stats. I have a character who has really low constitution, and I've enjoyed throwing creatures at them that have con saves against their like poison effects or something, because the face that he makes whenever he has to make a con save is priceless.
I've seen that face many a time myself.
Yeah. Just like, oh, why?
Yeah, I think this isn't really for player engagement, but I think it's important for DMs to not pick on a character all the time.
Yeah.
Sure. Huge. I think you get unanimous agreement on that one.
I'm not trying to pick on this guy. It's just funny every now and then.
Yes.
It's the same as favoring a player at the table.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Either way, it just feels shitty for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes shitty for the person, evidently.
Yeah. Go figure.
This is where I find player disengagement engagement really becomes a point of conversation, is in the length of the session, right?
Yeah, people get tired. That's why breaks are so important, especially if you're doing sessions longer than 3 hours. You need to have like at least either like 2 15 minutes, 1/2 hour, sometimes an hour is what you need, especially if like the DM or the players instigate a encounter that the DM wasn't prepared for and needs some time to like scrounge together a map real quick or do a quick note take just to come up with something for that particular moment.
And this is kind of why I asked too, because I find it really interesting, Denny. I think you might have unintentionally brought in two guests that have very opposite, I guess, like timelines when it comes to sessions. Because I want to ask and I want to know about like how is the attention, retention of attention, I guess maybe I should say, when it comes to these 2.5 hour sessions. Because typically with my group of players, and I've been playing with the same group now for a few years, I would argue. And even when we did the recordings for, wow, I'm forgetting the name of it, the one with that Nick DM.
Oh, Onwards and Upwards.
Yeah, Onwards and Upwards. Like we would do 6 to 8 hour sessions sometimes, right? And we do an hour break for lunch, of course, or dinner, depending on what time it was. But almost every session I've been a part of is 6 to 8 hours, and I find that around hour 4, everyone starts to have that glossed over, tired look that we talked. Do you find that ever happens with a 2.5 hour session?
It does, for sure. I think it just comes down to how the action of that session is progressing. If there are things happening that are keeping the players engaged, I don't think length has a big of an effect on player engagement as many people make it out to be. Obviously, if you're pushing those long sessions, then yes, for sure. But I think the difference between a 2 hour and a 4 hour session, not that much.
Cool. I'm gonna have to give it a try. In my mind, I'm like, how do you fit a session in 2 hours?
Also, in my game with Christy, my partner, Melanie, and Josh, who have both been on this podcast, we don't have our videos on. We just do voice, so we can't like see each other. I can't see them glossing over, but for the most part, they're always engaged. So,
mark of a good DM.
Mark of some good players. Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Something else that I don't know how often you guys use this particular tool, but I think a great way to keep your players engaged is music. Setting the ambiance.
Oh, I use music all the time.
Huge.
Yeah, nice thing about Zoom and Discord to an extent is there are these bots that you can use in Discord to play music, and you can change the music you're playing whenever. There's also Spotify integration, so if you're using Spotify, you can switch the playlist on a dime to go from social interaction music, something kind of jaunty and fun, to a more serious tone when they're walking through a creepy dungeon. And then in Zoom, you can just share your screen. So
yeah, nothing ruins a haunted graveyard like Daruda's Sandstorm. But and like one thing that I always have running in the background too is ambient sound. Like there's I haven't used it in a while because we're not doing it in person. It's really hard to run sound online with Zoom call.
Is it Sirenscape?
There's like it's like tabletop ambient sound. Oh. Like I think it's like the name of the actual website. It's like this really vague. It's like random things like people pattering around a city, like raindrops on stones.
Just like a soundboard type situation.
Exactly. And like I'll have that running in the background, and I'll fade in music and fade out music as things are going on too. So there's always some sort of sound, because actually it's a bit of a movie making trick that you see with Hollywood too. If you go watch a movie, there's always sound. There's never unless it's very intentional by the director. Yes,
exactly.
There's never an absence of sound, which is something to really pay attention to when we're talking about how to engage, because like that is one of the things that keeps audiences engaged while they're watching these films. There's even if it's just a rustle in a bush because it's windy, there's something.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't used ambient sounds as much as you have, clearly, but I'm sure I could work them in. But I tend to try to use my descriptors more to describe an environment rather than rely on an outside source. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It makes your job so much easier.
I should say, too, is like I usually orate what's happening in the environment, and then I'll introduce a sound clip with it. So like there's this like cross integration.
So you don't have to keep going.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll be like the howling winds of the desert, or like cut your ears as it races by, right? And then as I do that, I'll start the desert winds going on right in the background. So it's like, oh, cool, that's the cutting wind. Like, you know what I mean? Theater of the mind. I'm All for
The players are on the ship out at sea, the darkened clouds, lightning crackles. You just go, and the player's like, all right, so what do I?
I don't think you understand. There's thunder. You need to yell.
Get it? There's thunder.
I think you forgot about that.
Can you tell by how I'm doing thunder noises?
I think you might be engaged.
You may be engaged if. One of the cooler things that I've seen DMs do as well. Now, this requires a much bigger setup, but shout outs to Ryan Worcester because he's great for this kind of stuff. He actually has a soundboard with his microphone that can apply filters to the voice.
Mm.
So there's some really cool stuff he does with that too, which keeps me engaged because, like, when a demon is speaking to you from like a cultic summoning,
You sound like this.
yeah, exactly. And like we can manipulate our voices as DMs to do that, but when he adds reverb to it too, so that the entire room feels like it's echoing with the demon's voice, it's like, okay, that's pretty tight.
Yeah,
like that's
that is
some
cool.
next level DMing. So like I really want to give props to Ryan Verster because he's great for stuff like that. I don't think I've ever played a session with him where he isn't integrating some sort of cool sound with the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
I really encourage more DMs to be pursuing variant options like that.
Yeah, use the power of technology.
Yeah, I mean
It's beautiful.
It's at your fingertips.
they say like when it comes to doing your DM descriptions, like the best ways you can engage a player is to in your description appeal to more than one sense. Like you describe the location, sure, that's sight. What's the smell? Is it cold? That's a sense of touch. DMs can do that too. Maybe not currently with online play, but like having sound effects, having physical pictures you can show your players so you can get their sight. Because sometimes there's a disconnect of a player's imagination based on what you're imagining. So a picture will help that.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do that the audience can't see, but I can show to my friends here is to pull up a map behind me.
Oh,
Like, oh, look. So you guys are here and you have to go over there. So that's where it is.
Oh.
And doing that kind of thing.
That's really cool.
That's the power of paying too much money for a graphics card, you guys.
I have this great player at my table. Her name's Isabel, and she loves creating handcrafted maps. Like
That's awesome.
And they're absolutely beautiful. And every new campaign we do, she sits down with the DM for like 4 hours to draw out a new map with them. And so like every time we start up a new campaign, within the first few sessions, they get a world map and they just get to go crazy with understanding like the distance and the different types of sceneries and world element. Like it's so incredible to have a player like that at the table. Props to any player like that.
One thing to use, like, the software that I used to make that map I just showed you, it's not hand drawn. I'm not that good of an artist, but it's a good proxy, I guess. And then there's another thing to have a player who's so engaged in what you're creating that they want to make a map so that they can help the other players be engaged. And that's a great thing. That's the power of storytelling, baby.
Mm-hmm. I mean, something like that also helps to engage a player because they have literally created a piece of this story. Like the map they've made of the worlds that you're telling a story about. That's like not only engaging like the characters and what they're good at, but actually engaging the players and what they're good at is a great way to invest them in the story as well.
Speaking of which, we've talked a lot about sound and music. I think one thing that goes underrated, or I don't see a lot of tables, but it was just done like 4 sessions ago in one of the campaigns I'm a part of. And when it happened, I was like, okay, this is the coolest. It was a handwritten scrawled note with like a wax seal on it. Like that got handed to me and I opened it up. It looked like a letter that had been like forgotten to time for like 7,000 years. And when I opened it up and I read the words, I was like, this is the coolest. Because it wasn't even like typed. It was actually calligraphy written too.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
Props to them for like pursuing
Props
that
for
option.
props right there.
Yeah, props for props. That's
props
a great
are sweet.
section of this chat. Props for props.
Yeah, that is A+ DM.
We will need music for that, Denny. Props for props. This is the bit now. Put the music here. Okay, cool.
Welcome to the next part.
Yeah,
Props for props.
Yeah, get Salik to write another jingle for us. Thanks. Great.
We're also going to need a cool graphic where like prop comes from the left side of the screen
Yeah.
on top and the prop comes from the bottom right of the screen.
And it's just mine and Will's faces just screaming as both of the words come on screen.
Thank goodness this is a podcast.
If you can't tell, we're stealing your podcast idea.
Well, actually, I got to say, I got the idea for all this from you.
Oh,
Because
well, that's
Oh, wow.
good. to
So you
hear.
really are paying him the big bucks then.
Well, because
I'm making money.
Because Will started this idea where we were going to film a bunch of us just talking about D&D topics, and it didn't continue. So I was like, I still kind of want to do that. So now, Dicely, here we are.
Here we are.
So thank you, Will.
No, of course. Like I got really enthusiastic about the idea. That was like 2 years ago, I guess. No, I guess it was like 3 or 4 years ago now.
It's a long time, yeah.
Yeah, it was when I was back in Toronto, at the very least. But yeah, it was. I had this cool idea of like having DMs, like 4 or 5 DMs, sit down and talk about like one subject matter. I'm glad somebody took that up and like did something with it, because I'm definitely too lazy to do it myself.
Well, you're too busy, I would imagine, too.
During a pandemic, yes. I'm being too harsh on myself as a joke.
You're doing some great stuff.
Thank you very much. But back to player engagement. That's the important thing.
This has been props for props, the bit. It's over now. Now we are back.
I'm retiring it.
Denny, if you could just have the props scroll off from the left and the right, and we'll call it.
Holy shit.
Back to Dicely. But yeah, like honestly, if you can integrate props as a DM, if you have the time to prep that much material, it is one of the most magical experiences. Like during that session, we had letters, we had monocles. It was the craziest thing in the world.
That's awesome.
But it really helped us drop into character in some really intense ways, and it helped us get invested in the story. It's impossible as a player not to be engaged when the DM hands you a letter written by a wizard from 1,000 years ago. Like, how do you not, as the player, sit there and be like, yeah, okay, whatever, I'm going to go back to 9-gag. Like, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, for sure. Anything like that. Like, even as simple as handing a player an item card that they find, rather than being like, yeah, it's on your D&D Beyond, go look it up now. I think having the physical piece of paper that has something that they now have, like this great magic item that they found, it gives the player both a feeling that they earned this by having a physical thing, and now they get something to read that is part of the world. And it's as if their character is looking over this dagger that they found in a dungeon somewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, like we were talking earlier about how some players like draw during a session, and that helps them retain their memory. Like people have different styles of learning. So like some people have to handle things in order to retain information.
That's me. I need hands-on stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So kind of understanding your players and how they retain information, this might be incredibly to your benefit in order to do these things for them. I mean, unfortunately, we are where we are right now, so it's less likely, but yeah, if you can
still send a digital copy of an item card.
If you go to your door right now, Amazon will be right there with the prop I've sent you.
If you look under your chair, Denny, I've put a whoopee cushion there.
I'm a magician, just making things appear. But one thing I actually do too is, online messenger exists. You don't always have to message the group chat. There are times where I'll message just an individual player, and I'll be like, hey, like you see this with your passive perception. That way, none of the other players know about it, but this player does, right? Like, it helps to loop them back into the story.
Yeah.
Or, again, drawing upon the strengths of whoever's character it is. Like, private messaging is a really powerful tool we have with online communication right now.
That's true.
I encourage DMs to really pursue that during their storytelling. Like, it's really cool to be able to impart information to just one player and not have to worry about the other players hearing about it or metaing or anything like that.
And that's actually harder to do at a table, because if you're sending a message to a player, like obviously we all have phones now, it's very obvious if you put your head down and your thumbs start twiddling, and then someone at the table picks up their phone at a couple seconds later. But when you're playing online, you could pre-type out that message and just click send quickly, and no one can see your arm move to do that.
It is probably one of the biggest strengths about online playing, for sure.
Yeah. Also, the fact that you don't have to build physical maps is really nice. That's really, really nice.
One of my favorite moments recently playing online is something funny had just happened in the session, and all the players were laughing, and then suddenly one of the players at the table, and all the cameras were on, so was like laughing, ha ha ha, and then one of the players went, like, you can't see me, but like jaw dropped, eyes wide open, and every other player at the table went, what's going on? Like, everyone's attention just switched. The whole atmosphere of the campaign changed, and it was all done from a private message. Right, and all the private message was roll a wisdom saving throw, and the player was like, "Oh no, what's gonna happen?"
I mentioned in my D&D tag video I recently made, like managing how to deal with the metagame when somebody at the table gets charmed is so difficult. When you just go, all all right, Tommy, you're charmed now. And then everybody else goes, is he acting funny? Do I notice? Did I see the spell get cast? Private messaging solves that issue.
It sure does. Do we have any other ways to help with moment-to-moment engagement?
If we were at the same table, like I think one of the rules I might implement would be something like at session 0, all right, no electronics at the table unless you're using it for your character sheet. Because I don't want to be unreasonable. Yeah. A lot of the character sheet stuff is online now, but I want you guys to be engaged. So there's one of the standards we're going to set as a group. Like setting specific rules, super key.
I try to tell my players just try not to be on your phones. Like try to be at the very least, like listen to what's going on with the other players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing, and this is not so much moment to moment. I hope it's okay if I kind of veer away from that a little bit.
Sure.
One thing I try to do is like and this is so vague, but every 10 to 12 sessions, I try to have some sort of massively epic scene for where the characters are in their tier of play. Of course, meaning like levels 1 through 5, 6 through 10, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And like, I think that it's great to have combat. It's great to have the role playing. It's great to have like the 3 pillars of play, obviously important every single session. But I really do think that you need to have a little bit, like you need to have spikes in your story. And I think every DM knows this. Like without these spikes, without these moments of climax and
that's just basic
your story starts to drag on, right? Well, exactly.
Yeah.
But I've seen DMs too where it's like they're very interested in the struggle of the players, which is great, and you can tell really cool stories through that. But sometimes that struggle is just, it's always tough and it's always hard and it's always harsh, and it just kind of, it starts where like, oh, I'm a player, and it's like, oh, this game is really hard, but then it plateaus, right? Like the story plateaus with it because everything is just harsh.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dark Sun, I think is called. I played like a Dark Sun campaign. Am I thinking of the right name?
Yeah, that's
and it was like that, and it's like it's one thing to get into. It's interesting. It can just be consistently harsh though, and it can kind of take away. But every 10 to 12 sessions, I try to provide an opportunity for the players to do something epic, hero level status type stuff.
Right.
And you know, the best DMs have this as well. I remember Nicholas Casali, when he was DMing me one time, I was playing a barbarian Goliath, and I got to jump off a bridge onto a dragon's back, kill it while it was 120 feet in the air, and ride it into the ground. And it was like one of the coolest moments as a player. And at the end of the day, those, like, I think some DMs kind of shy away from those moments. And you have to be realistic, of course. Like, don't let your characters get away with jumping 300 feet off a tower, doing a front flip, and landing on their feet with no spells to resist the fall damage.
Yeah.
You know, like, you gotta be realistic about it, but give your players opportunities to, well, like we've said before, like, show their strengths, but really utilize their strengths in a storytelling way. Like, rule of cool. Matt Mercer talks about it all the time, right? It's like,
yeah, for sure.
You have to let rule of cool exist.
Yeah, I think an easy way to kind of gauge that is, can the characters in a superhero movie do it? If so, it might be allowed if it's a rule of cool moment.
What I also do with rule of cool moments is character goes like, oh, can I try this? Like, I back in the last campaign I ran, I had level 5 characters who had just met the big baddie of the campaign, and he had just achieved lichdom. Just turned into a lich. So it gives you a perspective of the level range of the campaign. I think they were just level 5, and Edmund, one of our players at the table, asked if, like, oh, can I walk up to him and talk to him? And I was like, oh, it depends on what you say and like how you roleplay it, right? And he was like, okay, here's what I do. Like, he steps forward, he starts like talking and like praising the lich's strength, and I'm like, okay, like, yeah, he lets you get a little bit closer. He's like just really schmoozing this lich, and he gets to the point where he's right in front of them, and he's like, and then I draw my 2 long swords and slash across his chest, right? And then it's like, all right, here's what I want you to do. You know, roll an attack roll, and I want you to also roll a deception roll. We're gonna see how these 2 things really integrate into the story. Like, he was like, this is the rule that I want. This is the cool thing that I want to do. It's like, okay, that's awesome, but we need to integrate rolls, because if you roll a 27 on hit and you roll like a 24 deception, let's play it out and see what happens. Let's give you benefit of the doubt and really see how this story develops. If you roll a crit fail on hit and a 3 on deception, well, that lich isn't going to be so impressed, right? Just as a for instance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Allow the rule of cool and then integrate rolls to see how it actually pans out.
Yeah, and I mean, whenever you integrate a role, you also add suspense.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the meta, too, I think a cool thing that I see sometimes at a table, and it always keeps us very excited, this is actually how my character died, is a DM going, okay, here's what you need to, in order to succeed in this. Like, it introduces a meta level of excitement and engagement for the players. For instance, this last thing that happened is like my character was integrating with the soul of a god. And it was like, okay, this is wild, first of all. And Edmund was like, all right, and here's the thing. Your character's real powerful at this point. You have an acclamation to the divine to begin with. If you roll anything other than a crit fail, you will integrate properly. But if you don't, some bad shit's going to happen. And I was like, okay, cool. And he's like, all right, grab your camera and lay it down where you're rolling your dice. And I was rolling my dice, and all the players at the table were like, oh my God, it's like a 5% chance, right?
Yeah.
It's 5% chance to fail. But everyone's losing their minds. Of course they are. Anyways, I rolled a crit fail. So my character turned into astral dust immediately. All of my things were destroyed. But it was this coolest moment where like there was excitement and engagement on the player level, on the role-playing level, and on the meta level. And like you can use the meta elements of D&D to your advantage to keep the players engaged. It was one of the most engaging moments I've ever had in D&D.
That's crazy.
So I think we've covered a lot of things about how to engage your players. And I mean, looking at Will's face right now, he's just like, I was so excited in that moment. Oh, gosh. Yeah, so hopefully for the listeners out there, you're able to take some of these things away and can use these at your table to help ensure that your players remain interested in your story and in their story.
I'm definitely going to take some of the things that you guys have said into my tables too.
For sure.
So
same on my end.
It's always a learning experience.
Always take from other DMs. They have great ideas. But for us guys here today, how's about we play ourselves a little game?
Yeah.
That sounds great. I'm super anxious about this game.
It'll be fine.
Don't worry. I was really bad at the last one, so I think I'll be equally as bad as this one.
I get intense imposter syndrome when I talk to other DMs. Mostly because the other DMs I talk to were the ones that introduced me. And that's the thing. That's why I'm bringing it up for other DMs out there who kind of feel like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't think you can DM wrong.
There is no right way. You just do it.
Yeah.
Just differently.
And hope.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
So, the game we've got here today. This game is kind of on its own redemption arc. The first time we played it, I made it way too fucking hard. But this is a game based off of the Family Feud TV show. This is Not So Dice, the Family Feud ripoff. All right, so how this game works. I've got a top 8 category, and you guys will buzz in. The first one to buzz in, you get the chance to guess something from the category, and I will either tell you it's right and you'll get a point, or it'll be wrong and you'll receive a red X. If you receive 3 red X's, you'll be out of the game, and the game ends when all 8 of the top 8 are selected, and whoever has the most points wins, or whoever does not get 3 red X's wins. So, are you guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. So, the category for today's Not So Dice is the 8 best feats in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition's Player's Handbook.
So when you say 8 best, what does best mean?
That's a good question.
This is 8 best feats, as according to CBR.com. I trust you guys not to go there and look. But it's just kind of the ones players find the most used, the most often took.
Okay, so the meta feats, basically.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm into this.
All right.
That was a good question, though, because there's a few feats on here that I subjectively think are great. But we're talking about community at large.
Yeah.
Yes.
We got to think like the average player.
Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
I'm so ready.
All right. So I've mentioned that the category is 8 best feats. 3, 2, 1, buzz in. Anthony got there first. So I should also mention, once Anthony guesses, Will has a chance to steal. So it's kind of a back and forth. It's just a matter of who gets in first. So, Anthony, do you have a guess for me?
I do have a guess for you. I'm going to say that the majority of players take tough.
All right. Is tough in the top 8 feats?
Bold choice, Anthony. Bold choice.
Unfortunately, that does receive you a red X. That is not on CBR.com's top 8.
They're fools. Tough is great.
Tough is a great feat. There are, I think it's like 42 feats in the Player's Handbook, so there are a lot. All right, so Will, you have a chance to steal.
Well, I have the great fortune of being a bit of a min-max player, and I think that is probably a majority of people who walk into D&D. I'm going to say Great Weapon Master.
All right, is Great Weapon Master on this list?
It's definitely on there.
Oh my god, it's not.
Ha!
What?
Oh,
that's wild.
Holy
That's
crap.
wild.
Okay.
What are these players doing?
You know what? Let me just quickly look over what their definition here is.
Yeah, we better make sure that these people know what they're talking about. Because I'll be honest with you, when you said tough, I was like, you know what? That's not what I thought of, but definitely would put in my top 8. I think almost every physical character I have has tough.
The way this site describes this list is they're ranked top to bottom on what are generally the best choices to either shore up a weakness or enhance existing strengths.
Great weapon master.
Wow, I can't believe
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that bizarre?
I'd put that up there. I'm not going to say another one because it might be on the list. I think it is.
No worries. All right.
So we both got a red X.
So I've reset the buzzer. If you guys are ready in 3, 2, 1. Anthony got it again.
Come on. That's okay. He gets a higher chance of getting 3 red X's. Next time,
It's true.
So that's pain that Great Weapon Master isn't on there. Makes me doubtful for what I would choose next. But
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the other one that everyone should take, Sharpshooter.
Unfortunately, because Great Weapon Master's not on
Wow.
here, so is not Sharpshooter.
This list though.
oh boy. You know, I got to go for one that I really think is going to be on there.
All right, what are you choosing?
I got to go with Warcaster. How can that not be on there? Advantage on concentration saving throws?
All right. Is Warcaster on this list? Will, you've got your first point. Warcaster is ranked number 7 out of 8.
Yeah, that's the way.
Holy crap. I am so surprised at this.
I'm getting scammed.
Yeah, I cannot believe Sharpshooter wasn't on there either.
Oh, dear. All right.
Okay, I'm used to getting scammed in these games.
Well, have you ever actually used the Warcaster feat, Anthony?
No. I mean, I haven't played very many characters. I'm mostly a forever DM, but
Oh, fair. If you ever get the privilege to play a sorcerer, pick up Warcaster when you get a chance, because with the advantage on Constitution saving throws, and then having to do concentration saves, you have advantage. Like, it's crazy. Or sorry, having proficiency with Constitution.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and Warcaster I usually will give to my clerics when I play them too, because it allows you to hold a weapon but still perform the somatic components of spells. So you can cast spells while holding a shield and a weapon too. So it's superb.
pretty nice.
All right, we've got ourselves round 3 in 3, 2, 1, go.
Mine didn't even go through that time. My internet is so bad. Did you hear the tap though?
I heard
I
a
did.
thump.
That was me. That was me tapping.
Oh my gosh, that was funny.
And I only tapped once.
I mean, it doesn't matter. What we've learned here is that you have the knowledge and I have the reflexes / the better internet. So
Yes, go ahead and get your third X in.
yeah, I'll just get my
I'm
third X
waiting.
and you'll win by default. I'll just pick one that's so dumb that no one would ever pick, and they'll go with it.
You'll probably be right.
Lucky, sure.
Is Lucky on this list?
If you don't pick Lucky, you're a fool.
Anthony?
Saying, if it's an option.
You get your first point. Lucky is number 6 on this list.
Yeah.
Way to go. That's not surprising.
Holy
Yeah.
crud. Okay. Anthony did get this one right. So I don't think you get the chance to steal. I think we're back to the buzzer.
It's fine with me. Just let Anthony buzz in.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go. Anthony got
Oh, come on.
Will's like anticipating it now. He's like, I gotta get
I
it.
heard the G and I was like, I clicked.
Oh, grief.
Okay. Well, I mean, see, the thing is, if I get it wrong, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go with Resilient.
I'd put that in my top 8.
Is Resilient on this list? Unfortunately, Anthony, you've earned your 3rd red X. You are...
Let's go.
That's a shoring up defense feat. I can't believe that. That's like the shoring up defense feat.
That is so interesting.
Pretty dumb.
This, yeah. You know what? I would not describe this list the way they've described it. That is interesting.
If it was like most popular feats or most effective.
Yeah. I think a number of our guesses would have been on there.
Well, let's see if Will can guess the rest of them before
Oh,
you.
You know, that's a great
Yeah, I
idea.
wanna see if Will actually wins.
Okay. You know what? I'm going to put Dual Wielder up there because that's a plus to AC. You can add your modifier to your offhand damage, and you can draw and stow your weapons as one action. So I think Dual Wielder.
You know what? Give me 3. Give me 3 total.
Okay, cool. I'm going to give Dual Wielder. I'm going to give Mobile and Observant. I think Observant is a highly underrated. +5 to initiative, and you can't be surprised. I think that's pretty solid.
Oh, I think what you described there was Alert.
Oh, sorry, Alert. Sorry, yes, that's what I'm thinking of. Alert. Yeah, so Alert, Dual Wielder, and Mobile. Yeah, we'll go with those 3. Did I get any of them right?
Alert and Mobile are both on this list.
Those were my next guesses. So.
Alert ranks number 8. We mentioned Warcaster is 7 and Lucky is 6. Healer is number 5, which I've found in my recent campaign this has been a life-saving feat to have.
What's healer do again?
Healer allows you to, using a healer's kit, grant somebody who is unconscious stabilize as an action instead of having to roll a medicine check for it. And as an action, you can heal somebody 1d6 plus 4 plus your level of hit points. And I'm playing a character who has no magic whatsoever, and we have no healer on the party. This has been a life-saving feat.
Can that be done as many times as you have healer kit? Like what? Like I don't.
It does use the resources of the healer's kit, which there are 10 when you buy one, but you can only do the healing once per long rest on a character.
Okay. That sounds fair.
Mhm.
That's
That
balanced.
makes more sense.
Yeah, as you were describing that, I was like, that's so broken. I need to get this feat immediately.
So number 4 was Sentinel, which I agree absolutely.
I should have
Yeah.
said Sentinel immediately, but I don't know. I decided to go for ones that, whatever. Scam.
And what does Sentinel do again?
So Sentinel is if somebody provokes an opportunity attack from you by moving away, and you hit them, you stop their movement. You make their movement 0, so they do not get to leave. Also, if they attack somebody who is not you and you're in melee range with them, you can take an opportunity attack against them. And their disengage action cannot save them from an opportunity attack from you. Yeah, this is one I find is so powerful. I've considered banning it from my games, but I'll let it stay.
How kind of you.
Yeah, take advantage of it while you can. I'll just start giving it to enemies. The third one is mobile, which Will mentioned. Second, this one I don't entirely understand, but is mounted combat.
I get that. I've seen it in action. It's absurd.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I've seen anybody use it, so that makes sense.
My friend Sanka did. Sorry.
Oh,
Continue.
of
Let's finish
course.
this
I
list.
do know that.
Yeah.
And the feat sitting in number 1 is Polearm Master.
What?
I can understand. I mean, not number 1, but I can understand why people would put this highly.
Yeah. Our buddy Nick used this in one of my campaigns, and it made him such a brutal paladin.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
It's just the concept of you, because
It just
slaves
seems
are a
like
great weapon, right?
too specific to be the best feat, you know?
Specifically, this combined with Sentinel is one of the broken combos of the game. And then being able to get Great Weapon Master at an even later level, even worse. If you want to be a superb melee fighter, do all 3 of those. Your DM will hate you.
But like mounted combatant, like advantage on all melee attack rolls against unmounted creatures. Like that's ridiculous to be the constant advantage, right? Can force an attack targeted at your mount to target you instead. You are never going to be dismounted unless you die or go unconscious. And if your mount is subjected to an effect that allows it to make a dexterity saving throw, they take only half damage if they fail and take no damage if they succeed. Like,
You know?
That's pretty strong.
For DMs struggling with this feat, I found this eventually with my player who was playing a mountain combatant. Make sure to introduce dungeon crawling more. If you find that the player is always on horseback, because they can't take a horse into the depths of a dungeon.
Nice.
Or they shouldn't be able to most of the time.
My mount is a big worm.
God, I would never let that happen.
Yeah, geez. Wow. I'm surprised at this. There are a lot of feats I hadn't even considered.
Well, once again, I lose the game because scam. But that's fine.
You had fun, right?
Yeah.
I had a great time.
I bet you did.
I thought I was going to lose miserably, to be honest with you.
The last time I was on, played a game where it was like Jeopardy, but with spells. And my guest partner, did a little bit of research. And I was like, I'm a DM. I know stuff. I didn't know stuff because the clues were all written like colloquially instead of like descriptions of spells or their components. I was like, this is a spell that you would use in this everyday situation. I'm like,
It's a trivia show.
It's a trivia show.
Dimension door.
I'm not good at trivia.
Oh, dear.
What spell would you use in an everyday situation?
Prestidigitation and that's it.
That's a great spell.
My one friend, I asked him this question, and he said meteor swarm.
Oh.
And I was like, what is wrong with you?
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Well, this does bring us to the final segment of the podcast. This is our chance to hear from the listeners. This is Question Dicely. So, today's question, and hilariously enough, they've come up in today's conversation. This is a friend of Will and mine. This question comes from Edmund_Clark_official on Instagram. And he asks, how did you get the team together? I.e. the first session and no one knows each other. So this is kind of a, how do you start the game? Like, how do you make the players work together?
Yeah, this sounds like a first session introduction. How do you begin the campaign?
Oh, okay. I took it a little differently, but I'm into it. Let's do it.
I mean, there's the immediate trope of the tavern.
Yeah. You all meet in a tavern. No one knows each other. I've done that for both of my long running campaigns, and it was fine because, it works. There's a reason it's a trope.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good if it works fine if your players are good role players and improvers. But if they are newer players or they kind of aren't super comfortable with each other, then you might want to force them into a setting to start off with. I think you talked about one a while ago, Denny, on a different episode of the podcast, or even when we were just chatting about how you threw your players into an immediately dangerous situation.
Yeah, just I think there was one time where it was everyone was just kind of villagers in a town, and they were just going about their day. And then all of a sudden, the wall of the village breaks down and goblins come storming in. And they're like, we can fight. You fight. You fight. Let's go kick some butt.
Nothing like a good brawl to bring people together.
Yeah.
For me, I always try to... I do try to avoid the tavern because I did that a number of times when I was in my first few campaigns that I tried to get started. My most recent one, though, I talked a little bit about the Mages College, and a professor that all of them had as students had just passed away. And for some reason, in the back of their mind, they felt a call to go to their professor's chamber. And so all of them, through magical influence, were drawn to this space. And they weren't even sure why, but they all met there, and they all started investigating the chamber, which kind of springboarded the first part of the campaign. And that magical spell still has yet to come around full circle, and I'm not going to reveal what it is, because it is a big part of the plot. But they were all drawn there through magical enchantment. The campaign before that was really interesting, because I only started with 2 players. They were both new. One of them was an Aasimar, and he was like, I want to start, because it was his first character. He's like, I want to start, because Aasimar, as people know, are creatures that have been expunged from the divine realms, right? They are, or they're descendants from the divine realms, depending on the lore of your world. But how I took it is that they, because there's a description of them, fallen Aasimar, for instance, right? I took that as literal. They had fallen from the sky. And so the campaign started, and Isabel's character was roaming around in the fields, just having her own little day. And then literally from the sky, Edmund's character crashed into a hill beside her. And that's what started the campaign. Right there. So that was pretty fun too.
That's awesome.
Wait a minute, is this the story of a character of the person who's asking this question?
Yeah. That's actually kind of funny. I didn't realize that.
Dude, that's deep.
Wow.
Edmund, I hope you appreciate this.
The layers to this.
Got layers.
Yeah, Edmund is actually a regular player at my table, so I thought it was funny that I happened to be on the podcast episode where he was asking a question. So perfect. But yeah, I think if you can drop your players into an action scene like Denny talked about, that's great. If you can drop them into a lore thing like I'm talking about, that's also cool. But don't be afraid to use the tavern. The tavern, well, it's a stereotype for a reason. I'm just going to put it out there. It's a great starting place for a reason. DMs use it for that reason. People go to taverns. They go out. They drink. They have food. They need places to stay. I don't know what to say. It happens.
It does happen. Taverns happen, y'all.
Yeah. The last campaign that I ran, I was able to start the campaign in a very specific way tailored to the players because we collaborated so much before the game started. We only had 3 players at the time. I knew one of them was a young girl who'd studied magic. I knew one of them was the guardian of this character because they decided to establish that as a connection. And they were disgraced and kind of a, I guess, oh dear, I'll just say disgraced individual within the town they were starting in. And then one of them was a goblin. And I was like, okay, there aren't any goblins in this town. So I was thinking about it and I'm like, what if I put the goblin in the town? He's not supposed to be there. He'll draw attention. Fuck it. So it was just like, okay, so now the goblin's wandering through town looking for something, and everybody's going, you see that goblin? How did he get in here? And then the player characters are also like, is that a goblin? So they went and talked to him, and then the party was formed.
Nice, that's fun.
You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it more, I think my favorite introduction to getting the group together was probably Nick's campaign Onwards and Upwards, because we did this really cool session 0, which was like it was literally called A Day in the Life, and we had no levels, we had no classes, no archetypes, nothing. We were literally just villagers, and what Nick had told us is find a reason as a character why you might be in this village, whether you lived here your whole life, you're here to do work, etc., etc. My character just happened to be working an odd job as a fisher because he was left by his captain. He used to be on a sailing ship, right? And like Denny, I think your character was the son of an innkeeper.
A son of a restaurateur.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then right, Jason's character was like an innkeep, right? Like he was sweeping the floors and stuff. And then there was this talent show. Basically, these knights from another, like the dominant kingdom in the land, had come just seeking out different types of talents that might be interesting to bring into their fold. And all of our characters somehow got looped into this talent show. And it wasn't like showing off combat prowess. Like one of our characters did a stand-up comedy routine, and it was actually hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
But yeah, like that was maybe my favorite session because it grounded our characters more than our classes. And I think that's huge as a DM if you can capture that. It's like, who are the characters rather than what can they do?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because class can be such like a over-defining characteristic of a character in D&D.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a barbarian, so I'm angry all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily true.
When it comes to building your character, in terms of playing, the class has the biggest impact. But in terms of the character, the class doesn't have to hold that same weight. And even when you have tropes or features like that barbarian you were talking about, I threw in an NPC in one campaign, and they were just this unassuming woman that was a prisoner with everyone else. That's another how another campaign started, was everybody was a prisoner. That's another great trope to use. And they were planning their escape, and they're like, okay, you can fight. And they're like, we don't know about this lady. We might need to protect her. And then as during the escape, like they got into an altercation and she went berserk. She lost it. And they're like, she's a barbarian.
That's really cool.
And after the fight ended, she didn't remember a thing. So it was like this, it was something that she had to deal with as the adventure went on.
That's sweet.
That's cool. Yeah, I think starting a campaign, even if you start them in a tavern, as long as you give them a nugget to go after, to start off with. Like plan an opening quest. Have something that your players can go for.
And it can be the old man in the corner of the room with an orc and a staff. You know, like don't be afraid of the tropes. They exist for a reason.
Yeah, that guy.
The one thing, I want to put this out there because I want a more talented DM than me to do this at some point, but I've always wanted to try out a Final Fantasy 15 opener. I don't know if you guys have played that game, but it opens up with you fighting one of the final bosses of the story.
Yeah.
And then it jumps back to the very start of the story. And it seems like something you could do in D&D, but I'm trying to wrap my head around how you might do that. It's such a cool idea.
You would have to, it would be a more linear storyline, I think.
Oh, for sure.
You wouldn't have as many different rails to go to. You would probably only have one or two rails to follow.
I think there's a chance instead to do that first campaign or the first session like it's the end of the game, and then like go through the story and let it happen organically. And then there would be this determined point in the campaign. They have to come across this like god of knowledge, and they go, look at this. This is what could happen. And it just describe that first session again. If it goes badly or if it goes well.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I'm into that. That's really cool. All right, yeah. Somebody out there do that. If not, I'm going to do it. Next campaign.
Will, does that mean I'm the good DM? Did I do it?
Yeah, you did it. Way to go, Denny.
Denny, you get the star of good DM approval. I've placed that upon your forehead.
Today, I am the winner of my podcast.
Congratulations.
I'm proud of you, Denny.
Oh, guys.
You solved D&D.
I won D&D. That's something you can't do. You know, people out there, you can't win D&D.
You figured it out.
Yeah.
You figured it out. Unless you're Teni Brant, you cannot win at D&D, okay?
Don't even try.
Get it out of your head.
Stop trying. I've already done it.
He's done it. Go home, pack up.
Oh dear. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to add?
I'm good.
Yeah, I think I've talked ad nauseum.
Oh, this was so good. Thank you both for coming on the podcast. This was a lot of fun. A lot of laughs.
Having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Man.
this was a
a
fun
lot
one.
of good time. This was a really good time.
And for the listeners out there, if you want to submit a question to Question Dicely, please send an email with your question to dicelychannel@gmail.com. And don't forget to leave a social media handle so that I can give you a shout out. But speaking of social media, do either of you have any social media you'd like to plug? Any projects to talk about?
Guest first? I'm a guest too, but new guest first.
I actually have a theater collective that I work with that Edmund, our question person today, and myself actually founded. It's called Cup of Hemlock Theater. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. We're constantly publishing videos, usually twice a week. We do lots of cool reviews of current theater shows and past theater shows. We talk about aspects of theater revolving around quality. There's some new podcast stuff coming out. Right now I'm interviewing people about pedagogy in theater, so how theater is taught and some of the positive and negative things that come along with that, especially at the post-secondary level. But yeah, check us out, Cup of Hemlock Theater. We do some really fun, creative, cool work, and we're always looking for new people to engage with. So check us out.
That sounds so fun.
It is.
I'm not really a theater person, but it sounds fun enough to engage a non-theater person. So there you go. You can find me on Twitter at Anthony the DM. I also offer professional dungeon master services at fiverr.com/I will be your incredible dungeon master. And I'm also working on a aspirational project of voice acting. So if you would like my voice for one of your projects, feel free to reach out.
And I will have the links for all their social media and everything they've listed down below if you're watching this on YouTube in the description, or if you're listening to anywhere where our podcast is, it'll be in the description for those sites as well. Thank you both so much. I had a blast today. And you know what?
This was great.
I tried to limit the number of prompts today because I'm like, these podcast episodes are getting long. We still managed to go 2 hours.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for tuning in to Speak Dicely. My name is Teni Brant, and I will speak Dicely with you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. I waved in real life. I don't know why I did.
The Speak Dicely podcast is produced by Teni Brant. The intro and outro music were created by Teni Brant. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe to the Dicely DnD YouTube channel. There you can listen to previous episodes of the Speak Dicely podcast, as well as watch our introductory series on how to play Dungeons & Dragons. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch at Dicely DnD. And you can now listen to the podcast on Podbean, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time on the Speak Dicely podcast.